Gold declaration is declining because of PPP incompetence and corruption. The local gold industry continues to suffer from the PPP's incompetence and lack of drive and initiative. Both low gold production and low declaration from our local small to medium scale producers are dropping. Labor shortage in this subsector shows signs of becoming chronic. Smuggling and illegal trading are increasingly rampant. The recent arrest and arraignment of 3 persons on a joint charge of exporting gold valued at US 560,000 without a license is the mere tip of the iceberg. Let us recall that in 2019, under the coalition government, gold declaration from local small to medium scale miners reached 448,321 ounces. In 2023, under the PPP, it dropped to 32,755 ounces, nearly 30% less in weight, or $250 million. This downward spiral is likely to persist as the government has displayed little serious and sustained effort to tackle gold smuggling, and on the other hand, to grapple with the manifestation of the resource curse in the form of skilled labor, leaving legacy tower in the form of skilled labor, leaving low-wage industries for the better-paying oil and construction sectors. Should new large-scale production fail to materialize as expected, Guyana will experience significant reduction in gold revenues and export earnings under the PPP. Based on our track record of success on the issue when in government, we would like to make the following recommendations. 1. An interagency task force should be assembled to address all forms of smuggling. Agency representatives should meet frequently and coordinate anti-smuggling efforts, emphasizing the sharing of information. The establishment of such a task force was critical to the coalition's effective anti-smuggling efforts. It should comprise at minimum representatives from the Guyana Gold Board, Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, Financial Intelligence Unit, Guyana Defense Force, Guyana Police Force, Guyana Revenue Authority, Attorney General's Office, and Civil Aviation Authority. International security cooperation should be emphasized with our neighbors so that borders are secured and smuggled gold returned to the jurisdiction of origin. The coalition was able to coordinate with Brazilian authorities in the past to prevent smuggling, and such partnership should be revived. Developing the skilled labor required by the industry should be a priority and incentivized. This means that there needs to be a renewed push to expand technical and vocational schools nationwide, providing them with resources and additional capacity so that the needs of the gold industry can be met. A student stipend of $50,000 a month should be provided to encourage enrollment and retention of students until graduation. Those are some of the most urgent measures that need to be undertaken to ensure our gold industry is revived. It is vital that any interagency task force is given the requisite mandate and resources. However, we do not anticipate any change of attitude and enthusiasm from the PPP on this and other sectors in its remaining time in government before the next election. The PPP, by its very nature, cannot deal with corruption because it is a corrupt entity in itself.
Thank you. Mr. Elfin Law.
Morning. The coalition government was the initiator of the audit of the oil sector. We wish to debunk a few tales peddled by Vice President Bar Jagdeo at his press conference yesterday on the coalition government's record in the oil sector. The Vice President spoke of local content policy, the revision of the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, and of the first Exxon oil audit, as if these originated under the current PPPC government. They did not. They are accomplishments of the coalition government. In fact, the PPP sought to hide the audit from the people of Guyana, and it was only after consistent and significant pressure from the opposition, cultural news, and other stakeholders that the corrupt, incompetent, and divisive regime was forced to make the audit public. First, the record will show that the coalition government produced the country's first local content policy in January of 2020, after 2 years of comprehensive effort. The policy framework was crafted after extensive consultations with government agencies such as GoInvest, Small Business Bureau, and the EPA, private sector groups such as the Private Sector Commission, and all the regional chambers of commerce, educational institutions such as UG, civil society organizations such as the Guyana Bar Association, and the oil exploration companies in Guyana such as Exxon and CGX. These consultations and preparatory work informed the Local Content Act, passed in 2021 by the PUP with much fanfare. Second, the record will also reveal that it was the coalition government which contracted the services of a foreign consultancy firm to extensively revamp the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act through a $4.2 billion US $20 million World Bank loan. This coalition government initiative was the basis of the Petroleum Activities Act passed in August 2023, noting that the PPP made changes to ensure their domination and control rather than promoting transparency and accountability. Third, the VP spoke of the first oil audit as an attainment of the PPP government. The fact is, it was the coalition government who contracted IHS Markit to independently audit the cost recovery claim submission by Exxon for the period between 1999 and 2017. This was done at the time when the PPPC was in opposition and the APNU-AFC formed the government. This is a fact. The PPP is barefacedly seeking to take credit for work it did not do and its corrupt ways do not permit them to do. These tales by Barrett Jagdeo are not memory lapses or slips of the tongue. They are part of his devious ploy to conveniently erase history and to create a false narrative that the coalition did nothing during its term in office. The more we remind the nation of our achievements, the more Jagdeo's ego deflates and bruises.
Thank you. Mr. Kanish Mohan.
Thank you very much. PPP continues to be lawless, unlawfully appoints overseer at Port Morant, NDC. The opposition condemns the unlawful appointment of Ms. Umawati Ramnath, an overseer at the Port Morant Johns Neighborhood Democratic Council. Despite being elected as a councillor in the June 2023 local government elections, she was appointed as a paid staff by the Local Government Commission upon the instruction of the minister within the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, Anand Prasad. Her appointment to the position of overseer, which comes with a monthly salary, violates the rule of law and the rights of constituents at the hands of the NDC, the Local Government Commission, and the PPP government. Since her appointment, Ms. Ramnath has reportedly been implicated in alleged financial infractions, including, but not limited to, the production of false receipts and inflated bills. These actions not only undermine the integrity of the NDC, but also betray the trust placed in public officials to act in the best interests of their NDC. Little wonder, therefore, that the people of the NDC see her as part of the usual PPP corruption and incompetence that is now the new moral and normal in NDCs controlled by the PPP. The PNCR is aware that these complaints were raised with the minister on his recent visit to the Quarantine Coast. The minister promised to settle the matter, but has since reneged on this promise. We are not surprised since the entire PPP is engulfed in the culture of corruption, incompetence, and the usual cover-up by the PPP governing cabal. Such is the nature of the PPP's political culture. Let it be known that some councillors resisted and will continue to resist this unlawful appointment despite their fear of being victimized by the hierarchy of the PPP. The PPP regime is so corrupt at the highest level that it compelled to protest PPP corruption at the lower levels. The opposition stands in solidarity with the councillors who have bravely raised their voices against this blatant abuse of power and corruption. We commend their efforts to uphold the law and demand that swift action be taken to reconstitute the Local Government Commission to address this and many other issues within the local government system in a principled and impartial way. Political interference by the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development must be brought to an immediate end. It is imperative that those entrusted with public office are held accountable for their actions, and any attempts to silence dissent or manipulative financial processes will be met with resolute opposition. The opposition calls on all stakeholders to join us in advocating for good governance, accountability, transparency, and the promotion of morality and decency at all levels of government. Unfortunately, these important principles cannot and will never guide the PPP corrupt and incompetent regime. Guyanese are aware that only a change of government can rectify this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor for questions on the press statement.
Since nobody's going, I have just three questions. Um,
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Trina Williams, Ghana Chronicle. Mr. Norton, there was a letter published in the Stabrook News last week by Mr. Eglin Gomes saying that the expenditure monthly at Congress Place is $3 million, but the income is $800,000, I believe. My question is, can you confirm this? Secondly, a follow-up there. I know that last year you said that an audit will be conducted and you will seek an independent source. Can you give us an update with that? And thirdly, on Congress, can you say how many persons will be participating this year?
First of all, on Eglin Gomes, I don't know he has the authority to speak on anything in the People's National Congress reform. And so I would not respond to anything that is said by Eglin Gomes, apart from the fact that our financial operations are our business. Second, we have had an audit conducted on at least one part of our operations, but we are not obligated to put our audits in the public domain. Those who are pushing for an audit in the public domain clearly has an agenda that suits the PPP, but doesn't suit the interests of the People's National Congress reform. As it relates to Congress and how many people will attend, our party has a process. The first part of that process has been completed. That is, people applying and renewing the membership. The second part of that process is that there is a accreditation committee which operates independently, will then look at the data and then inform the party membership as to who are entitled to be delegates and who aren't. For anyone, including me, to suggest what the size of the Congress will be premature.
Okay, a quick follow up on what you said with the parties not obligated to put their financial business out there, which brought me back to the fact that Mr. Merceline, the former PNCR treasurer, had said a number of things on a show. Apart from the allegations of racial discrimination, which I'll come to just now, he mentioned that the party doesn't want to let their members in the diaspora know how their money is being spent. So, can you comment on that?
Well, the first assumption you're making there is that members of the diaspora are sending us money. I'm not so sure that that assumption is correct, but one is entitled to make an assumption, however baseless it is. Secondly, as it relates to Mercelin, he was on record as saying that the party isn't racist. It probably now suits him to say something else. And with the PPP trying to get people to go in that direction, I mean, I'm aware that right now, anybody who has a problem and needs it to be resolved by the government, one of the conditions the PPP is put in is that they declare that they are PPP members, and then they will get their issue resolved. The People's Progressive Party is in crisis. It is desperate. If you follow in what is happening in the elections in the indigenous communities, you will see that the PPP is taking a licking. And therefore, one sees an attempt to try to turn the focus on the People's National Congress reform and the coalition. May I state at this stage that the focus has to be continued on the People's Progressive Party because they are very corrupt, and the corruption is affecting the society because they are very incompetent, and their incompetence is affecting the society, and they are very divisive. You just had to look at how they inserted Kwame Mackay into the Mucka issue to ensure that the people didn't get a chance to speak. Fortunately, the people in Ghana are very conscious. They proceeded to speak and bring to the attention of the United States congressman that is here the very corrupt and divisive nature of the People's Progressive Party. And so I would see what is being said as Mercel, and it's not anything critical for us to worry about. It's a function of a process that the PPP has unleashed.
Question from me on the same allegations of racial discrimination within the party. I want to know how you, as the leader, is addressing these allegations, because it's not only from Merceline, but we also saw that Ms. Amna Ali Ubaj-Narain had mentioned that Indo-Guyanese are being sidelined. So I want to know how you are addressing this issue, and a follow-up is, and if you do have perpetrators who are practicing this in the party, how are you dealing with them?
I'll let Ganesh go first and then I'll go.
Yeah, I requested of the leader to speak on this matter because I've recognized that it is playing out in the public space for political mileage, especially to the People's Progressive Party. I am an Indo-Guyanese, a proud one. I am a part of this party since 2008. And I joined this party because I've recognized that there is a space for me. When I came in, I met distinguished Indian colleagues like that of Bishweshwar Kami Ramsarup, Winston Murray, R.T. Rick Knott, and I can name many others. The attempt to paint the People's National Congress reform as a party that promotes racism is baseless. Outside of the current leader, Aubrey Norton, even when I was here from the inception under the leadership of Robert Horman, Orlando Corbin, and the President Granger, there was that attempt also to dub the PNCR as a racist party, which is baseless in its entirety. I have never heard Ubaj-Narain pointing to racism, but I'm not doubting you. I have never heard also Amna Ali pointing to racism, but I'm not doubting you. Because we are in this political environment right now, where people will tend to say all that they believe is necessary for their interest to be met. But I want to remove completely this whole notion of racism in the PNC, especially towards Indian Guyanese. That is not true. Now, let me speak directly to Comrade Aubrey Norton. When I came in this party, Comrade Aubrey Norton was pushing for a man named Winston Shripal Murray to become leader of this party. So I am trying to fathom in my head, how is it that Comrade Norton can be a racist when he was fighting for an Indo-Guyanese to be leader of the People's National Congress reform in the name of Winston Shripal Murray? Secondly, when I came in, I also participated in a number of training sessions and participated in several activities, which was coordinated by Comrade Norton in those years. I think it's around 2009, 2010 time. I know of Comrade Norton also enjoying a good working relationship still with the name Comrade R.T. Ricknott, who is an Indian, prominent Indian in the PNCR. I can go down the road of listing a number of names from Region 6, Region 5, Region 4, Region 3, Region 2, whom I know personally that he enjoys a good working relationship with, that are of Indian ethnicity. Even if we look at the indigenous arm, Comrade Norton also enjoys a good working relationship with indigenous people of this party. I'm saying that to put at rest this whole notion of Comrade Norton being a racist person. It is not true. I have never had such dealings or never felt in any way, shape, or form racism coming from Comrade Norton. In fact, I remember writing a letter to that extent some time back because it was surfacing, and I stand by those words, and I see it coming again, which is very, very unfortunate. So I must let you know that the claim of racism against Comrade Norton is baseless. I trust that answers your question.
I have one more question. A follow-up on that.
You're saying it's baseless, the allegations, right? But exactly how is the party dealing with this? I know that you guys are constantly calling yourself a government in waiting. Do you think that this is a good image that is being portrayed to the electorate?
Listen,
Let me
we are a
answer.
political party, with your permission.
Uh-huh.
We are a political party of thousands of people. We don't have 10 members or 6 members or 5 members. We're a political party with thousands of members. And we are in a political season internally right now where a lot of things will be said about the people who have their interest and people who would like to satisfy their interest. Comrade Norton is vying for the leader, and we know openly Comrade Roysdale Ford and Comrade Amanza Walton Desir have also signaled their intent. The sad reality about this democracy in the PNCR, which is its strength, and when used in all fashion, can also be a weakness in the sense that people will say what they have to say. Comrade Norton, Comrade Ford, and Comrade Amanza will campaign with the intention of winning the hearts of delegates. And all kind of craziness normally comes out during this season. I've been around for quite some time, so I can tell you that. I want you to know, and it's not different from like what happened in the PPP. I made this point before to you. When we found out that Irfan Ali doesn't have a first degree, it was a member from the PPP that sent that information to us. When we found out that he attended this university in IFLOT, it was a PPP member that said that to us. So I'm making that point to say to you that silly season is on. But do not use 1 or 2 or 3 people to cast an entire judgment on a party that has thousands of people across and in the diaspora.
Thank you. I see the hand of Ms. Nacia. Could you state your media house?
Good morning, Dave Richard, Nightly News. My question is for Mr. Norton.
Barajapio, he announced that $7 million would be appointed for cost of living measures later in 2024. What are your thoughts on this? And he also said it would be beneficial for Guyanese. Do you think it would be?
Let me start by saying that money was approved when the budget was approved. And the government does this nonsense all the time. They put the money in the budget and they wait until December to give it out so that they don't have to give an increase at the end of the year, which happened under the APNUFC. So let it be made very, very clear that this is not anything new and something special coming out of Barrett's head. Nothing special comes out of his head. This is a provision that has been there, and the government is delaying its distribution to suit its own ends. Now, we have been calling for cost of living relief for the last 3 years. The government doesn't give any. They put this money in the budget. At the end of the year, they will give it, and then they will talk about benefiting the people. In the meantime, inflation continues, the high cost of living continues, and the value of that money is eroded by the time it is given. And so it is the usual gimmick of Barajapio. On the point that he says it will be beneficial, everything he says will be beneficial. But one does not know how beneficial it will be if you put it in January. There have been increases in prices and all kinds of things during the year. And then you come in December to give it. You yourself would have eroded some of the benefits that should have been had if it was given in January or February. And so, look, one of the most deceitful human beings you can meet is Barajapio. He's so deceitful that he deceives himself that he's making sense. And he doesn't make sense. The average man out there listens to him, some turn off the TV or the phone, but the average man out there has concluded that this man is a pathological liar who is incompetent. He has not one successful project to show over the years that he presided over this country. And so one has arrived at the point where whenever Barajapio talks, people know he has to talk because he's preventing the others in his party from talking. He alone has a tongue. Unfortunately, his tongue has no honesty whatsoever. And so I will not be worried by what Barajapio says. Barajapio is a hypocrite, a deceitful person, and the fact that he seeks to close down everybody who can challenge him. I mean, an incompetent like Barajapio, whose qualifications cannot match that of Vincent Adams, would proceed to ridicule Vincent Adams, a man who has earned his doctorate, against a man who has an honorary doctorate. And you know something we should point out in this country? Forbes Burnham had an honorary doctorate, and he was never called Dr. Burnham. An honorary doctorate is just what it says, honorary. Barajapio is a patient, not a doctor.
I'd like to add to that really what we're seeing from the government and what we've been seeing for the last couple of years is that they have no interest in the cost of living crisis. The fact that we're already halfway into the year and the government has not put out those measures, has not introduced relief. They even said that they would carry out consultation as to the relief that they're going to put out. We've not seen anything really in that regard. That to me is an indication that they have no interest in the cost of living crisis. But even further, the government is on record as saying that it's 2% inflation last year, which is really no meaningful inflation, no meaningful increase in prices. Whereas we've seen the IMF say 5.5% inflation, the US government says 6.6% inflation, and I've calculated an expectation of 7% inflation for last year. What that means is that the government is trying to pretend that there's no cost of living crisis. And so when you see them put $7 billion towards it, which is not even 1% of a $1 trillion budget, it is just an indication that they are comfortable with the suffering the guides are feeling in their everyday lives when they go to the market and when they try to make ends meet. Frankly, it is disgusting, but it has been the attitude of the PUP for the past several years. We remind this nation again that in 2022, Guyana received an additional 300 million US of unexpected revenue due to the high price of oil. The government has refused to put that kind of money in the pocket of Guyanese directly, as we had indicated that they should, in order to relieve some of these cost of living woes, and has continued to spend budgets that are massive without giving reasonable cost of living relief. Last year's budget, when you look at 5 years worth of budgets under the PUP, that's equivalent to last year's budget. And this year's budget is as large as the entire budget, all the budgets that the coalition put in place during its time in office. What that means is that the government is spending something like 10 years worth of spending and giving Guyanese next to nothing for cost of living relief. That to me is as much as it is the biggest indictment you can see when it comes to the government's attitude towards the cost of living crisis.
I want to also speak to the question of benefit. If 90% of your infrastructure budget, which is the single largest part of the budget, is going to a small PPP elite family and friends, then when one is talking about beneficiaries in Guyana, one has to talk about those select contractors under the People's Progressive Party who carries away 90% of the income. That is benefiting. The average man is not benefiting. How is the average man benefiting when he cannot go in the store and purchase? How is the average man going to benefit when the allocation you will give him when you give out the 7 billion will not increase his purchasing power? So to talk about the average man benefiting is Barra Jagdeo again in his fashion of deceiving, attempting to deceive the Guyanese people that they will benefit. Barra Jagdeo, his family, friends, and favorites of the PPP are the beneficiaries of this economic boom that we are facing.
The last remark we would want to make on this is we have been advising the government as to what measures it can take to deal with the cost of living crisis for years now. The leader of the opposition in his budget speech, not this one, the previous one, made up a long list of recommendations. We have consistently given the government specific recommendations like providing grants for farmers so they can expand production and lower the cost of production with equipment, like providing grants to canter operators and truck drivers who are carrying groceries from the farm to the market to lower the cost of food. We've provided a long list of recommendations, but the government just isn't interested in actually doing anything about the crisis. They are hoping that this crisis will just go away. And so they're just going to try to pretend that there's no crisis right up until the election.
I see the hand of Ms. Crystal Kaiturnes.
Company that you doing?
Crystal? All right, she may be having.
Crystal Young with Kaiturnes. I have two questions which would be directed to Mr. Norton. Star Guyana and Exxon have a 50% profit sharing agreement, and Jagdeo said we don't have any say in the spendings of Exxon. What is your take on this or your party position on that? Secondly, you previously said you have most of the information you need on ring fencing. Have you and your oil and gas team arrived at a decision for ring fencing the oil projects?
Spending of Exxon. This is, as I understand it, a profit sharing agreement. And to the extent it's a profit sharing agreement, the government has to know what the expenditures are. Barra Jagdeo is silly. How is it that you are going to know what the profits are if you don't know what the expenditures are? And so the government is obligated to get from Exxon the expenditures so that we can know exactly what it was expended on, how much was expended, so that the profit can be calculated so that they can be profit sharing. So that is clear. As it relates to ring fencing, we have concluded that ring fencing will serve the people of Guyana. It will help us to reduce the placing of expenditure where they should not be placed. However, we still leave open an opportunity to look at every project separately and to decide whether ring fencing is a positive or not. Generally, we believe ring fencing positive, but there might be cases where it might not be. And so we generally said before, and we say it now, we agree for the need to ring fencing, but we would want to have all the data and look at every project on its merit and determine how we ring fence.
Thank you. Any other questions for statement or outside of?
Shanika, I'd just like to make a quick addition to one note there. On the topic of Exxon's spending, really what you're seeing by Vice President Jagdeo is an attempt to distance himself from not just really the spending, but the audits that are going on of Exxon's spending. And the reason for that is that there are some serious questions that have been raised around these audits. And so, of course, the audits, as the leader is indicating, that's how you're going to know exactly what was spent and how you're going to have a handle on it. And of course, the government receives regular reports on the activities of the oil and gas companies. So they have an idea of what they're doing. But Jagdeo wants to create the perception that the government has no say, that it is a hands-off approach, and that therefore, whatever comes out in the audit, they have no control over it. Now, really, what we're seeing with the second audit, which has raised a lot of concern, is that the second audit has been silent as to its overall scope, has not dealt with or not addressed, as the first audit did, several of the major expenses. This is something that's been raised. And so we're seeing expenses like the expenses for drill ships and so on not really be mentioned or spoken about much in that second audit. And that is a very significant expense because it's multiple drill ships over the course of more than 1 year. So that is just one example where the second audit has raised the question as to how comprehensive it is, especially in comparison with the first audit. We've previously said we believe that international auditors will be able to do a good job on this, and so we must look for expertise as much as possible. What I would also say, though, is we must not allow the government to create the perception that it has no say, it has no involvement in the industry, because it is trying to create the idea that there can be no accountability. That is really what Jagdeo is driving at. That's been the thrust of many of his statements lately. Oh, the experts, I'm not involved. He's trying to say that there's no level of accountability, there's nothing can be done, because there are serious questions and the government has been unable to answer them and continues to dodge them.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All right. With there being no other questions, I want to thank all of the media houses who joined today's press conference, and of course our viewing audience. We do hope that you have a wonderful weekend.
Recording stopped.